Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of A Face for Radio. I'm your host, Andrew Latham. Sorry, it's been a couple days. Sunday, I was busy working all day and was too pissed off by the end of the day to come and record an episode. That's actually how pissed off I was. When I'm pissed, I generally make a better show, but I was super pissed. I had to listen to some people yap about all natural blah 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 all day, and I didn't give a crap about that. But luckily I did think a lot about the show over the weekend. I'm going to fine tune it, and I know I say this all the freaking time. What the hell do you guys care? Anyway, let's get into it. Today's episode. Do you guys hear that? Papers. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different from ones I've done before. I'm not even going to look at the Would You Rather or whatever's yet. We're going to wait for that on Thursday. Thursday I've got a guest, and he's funny, and he's going to help us with that. But, I've got this microphone, smarter than everyone else. But most importantly, I have a lot of free time. And I've always wanted to, and enjoyed, proving people wrong. But in all seriousness, I think that I would like to start doing something educational. So I'm going to school you people on guns. This will probably be a 2-part, maybe even 3-part series, just because I don't want this one to get too long. No more than an hour. Hopefully just 45 minutes. But, what with elections coming up, both sides are going to be talking about firearms and gun control, and we need to do more, we need to do less, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of what the media says, quote unquote, the media, is wrong. A lot of what you hear could be wrong. I am going to do my best to present information in an unbiased manner. I do like guns. I own 8 firearms. I've bought them in stores, online, and from individuals, so I can tell you all about how all that works. I've done my fair share of research, so if you don't give a crap about guns or firearms or politics or any of that, then just shut this off and wait for Friday's show. I'm going to do another show that'll come out Thursday that will cover another topic about gun control. We'll get into some myths, other countries, what they do and how it works for them. But today I just want to go over federal legislation concerning firearms, the major ones since 1934. Obviously, I can't go over all of them. There's way too many. And then when you get into state laws, it just gets way too much. But the laws I'm going to talk about are the big ones that have, basically, if you want to buy a gun, are getting into guns, or just want to know, these are the ones that are going to affect, basically, firearms today. So let's just get into it. We'll start with, I'll have to put that one tomorrow. Let me just make a note of that. Concealed carry permits. Those are due that on what's today, the 19th? So due on 20th. Okay. All right. So up until 1934, gun laws were pretty lax. You could buy guns pretty easily. There weren't any restrictions on full auto, semi-auto, suppressors, anything like that. Generally speaking, if the military could buy it, then any civilian could buy it. That with little to no restrictions. In 1908, you could buy a suppressor for $8 and have it mailed to you. Thompson submachine guns, the Tommy guns, choppers, Chicago typewriters, those were advertised by Thompson as home defense. So definitely the gun culture has changed. Yeah, who gives a crap? So the first major piece of federal legislation was signed in 1934, June 26, 1934, to be exact. That was signed in by FDR, and it's called the National Firearms Act. It regulates the following items: machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, any other weapons, suppressors, and destructive devices. And we'll get into the ATF definitions of those later. But this was put into law to combat the mafia and the gangsters. The local law enforcement was severely outgunned by those guys. So in a vain attempt to get that under control, they put this law into effect. The basic gist of the law is to own any of those things, you had to pay a $200 tax, submit paperwork to the ATF, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which was relatively new, obviously, and wait for your background check to come back, all the papers are clear, and then you could take possession of that firearm. So part of that legislation is that $200 tax stamp the amount would not change, ever. Forever it would be $200. $200 in 1934, today it would be equivalent to $3,554.21, counting for inflation. So if that $200 was to, stay with inflation, it'd be a pretty hefty amount today. And back then it was a hefty amount. I mean, $3,500. Most guns didn't cost $200. They were way cheaper than that. I can't tell you what exact prices were of Thompsons and BARs and things like that, but they didn't go for $200. I mean, $3,500. There's not a lot of guns today that sell for $3,500. But the ATF at this time came out with these categories that the National Firearms Act would deal with. And so we'll start with a machine gun. The ATF defines a machine gun as any weapon which shoots, is designed to shoot, or can be readily restored to shoot automatically more than one shot without manual reloading by a single function of the trigger. That basically says if you hold down the trigger, it'll keep firing until you stop. So the ATF also defines a machine gun as the frame or receiver of any such weapon, basically the part of the gun that makes it a machine gun, the working components. Any part designed and intended solely and exclusively, or combination of parts designed and intended for use in converting a weapon into a machine gun, or any combination of parts from which a machine gun can be assembled, if such parts are in the possession or under the control of a person. Okay, so that's a pretty specific definition, and we'll get into later about why the ATF has these kinds of definitions, is because to the ATF, intent is also really important. For example, in order to convert an AR-15 into an M16 or M4, in order to convert that into fully automatic, you only need one other component, which is the full auto sear, and you can buy those online for like $20. Okay, but the point is, if you put it into your gun, if you do the machining necessary and put it into your AR-15, you just committed a felony, and if the ATF finds out, which we'll get into later again, but that's a minimum of 10 years in jail and like a $100,000 fine. And the ATF doesn't generally go easy. They don't really take plea deals, and they don't not prosecute. They prosecute as much as they can. They like to make examples out of people. But so that's what the ATF considers a machine gun. The next thing that they put on the list was an SBR, commonly referred to as an SBR, short-barreled rifle. And a short-barreled rifle is a rifle, meaning a gun that is designed to be fired from the shoulder with a barrel length of less than 16 inches, or a rifle with overall length of less than 26 inches. The reason they added this to the list was because a lot of gangsters were taking BARs, Browning automatic rifles, which were machine guns. They fired the 30-06 cartridge, which is a pretty stout cartridge. And what was going on was these guys were cutting down the barrels, hiding them under trench coats or whatnot, and mowing down people with them. So that's why they got this. The SBR law and short-barreled shotgun laws, thanks to the bullpup design, are pretty much, they don't really matter. Bullpups are about the same length. So, a bullpup is a rifle with the action of the gun behind the trigger, as well as the magazine well is behind the trigger. So basically, it allows to have a standard length barrel, which is considered 16 inches, to be in a much shorter package. Okay. So a short-barreled shotgun is a little bit different. With a shotgun, the barrel length has to be over 18 inches with an overall length of more than 26 inches. But short-barreled shotguns also get kind of complicated because basically a short-barreled shotgun is a shotgun if you had a shotgun with a, for example, 24-inch barrel, and you cut it down to, let's say, 16 inches. 16 is below 18, so you have a short-barreled shotgun. But If you have a shotgun receiver that's never had a barrel on it, and you take like a 6-inch barrel and put it on it, that's not a short-barreled shotgun. That's an any other weapon. Stupid, yes, it is the ATF, and the ATF is stupid, and all their rulings are pretty much stupid. We'll get into that later again, but that's what a short-barreled shotgun is. That's why if you're into guns or you look at guns, you'll see that often manufacturers will give a 1/2-inch kind of leeway. It'll have a 16.5-inch barrel if it's a rifle, or an 18.5-inch barrel if it's a shotgun. And the reason is, for a rifle, if it's 15.99999 to infinity inches, that's below 16. That's a short-barreled rifle, and if you don't have the paperwork, then you committed a felony. And the way they measure these rifles is from the end of the muzzle, which is the muzzle is where the bullet exits, to the front of the bolt face when the bolt is closed. Okay, so you close the bolt on the gun, you put a dowel or something down there, you mark it, and then you measure that, and that's how long your barrel is considered by the ATF. Okay, all these are definitions done by the ATF. Now we get into this really weird category called any other weapons, and I take this straight off of the ATF website, and it is any weapon or device capable of being concealed on the person from which a shot can be discharged through the energy of an explosive. A pistol or revolver. Okay, so we'll get into that. So that's basically like, they call them zip guns. But for example, like if there's if it's a pen, if it looks like a pen but it's actually a gun, that would be in any other weapon. If it's a cane that hides a gun, that's in any other weapon. A pistol or revolver having a barrel with a smooth bore, designed or redesigned to fire a fixed shotgun shell. That term will come up a lot in the ATF, redesigned. Weapons with combination shotgun and rifle barrels 12 inches or more, less than 18 inches in length, so between 12 and 18 inches, from which only a single discharge can be made from either barrel without manual reloading, and any such weapon which may be readily restored to fire. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really know what that means. I'm going to need a little bit more research into that, but I've been getting other stuff ready. But as you can see, any other weapons gets pretty complicated and confusing. There was a gun that I think it was in the 80s. It was designed, and what it was a pen that was also a gun. So with a short-barreled shotgun, a destructive device, a short-barreled rifle, and a machine gun, that tax stamp is $200. With any other weapon, it's only $5. So it's not that big of a deal, but you still have a waiting period, and you just can't grab it. So manufacturers do all they can to make sure that their guns aren't any other weapons or destructive devices. So in the 80s, there was this gun. I can't remember what it was called, but anyways, it was a pen, but you manipulate it in such a way that the rear end of the pen became a handle, and there was a trigger on it, and you could fire a .22 caliber round out of it. It was single shot. And the way they were able to get out of the any other weapon status is because the rear end of the pen folded down and looked like a handle, so it resembled a gun. I mean, that's how arbitrary these laws are to the ATF. There's a company called X Products that makes something called the cannon, which is an upper receiver for your AR-15 that uses blank rounds and fires tennis balls, cans, obviously cannon, whatever you can fit into it out of the it's not even a barrel, out of the cannon like thing on the end. The ATF considered it an any other weapon, or it was a short-barreled shotgun. I couldn't remember, but anyways, the ATF ruled on it. Well, first they said, yeah, you're good to go, and it went into production and was sold. And then they said, nah, we changed our mind. It has to be regulated by this National Firearms Act. And then X Products worked with them. They changed the design. Now the ATF has finally come out and said, yes, this thing that does not shoot bullets is not a gun. you can sell it. So that's also something that happens with the ATF a lot, is they'll make a ruling and say this is good to go, because a gun, before it can be manufactured or sold, has to get approved by the ATF. And then, halfway through they'll change their mind. They did that with the Akins accelerator for Ruger 1022s, which made the Ruger 1022 almost fully automatic. But there's a lot of ways to work around these laws, which we'll get into later. But let's get into that last section of the National Firearms Act. Oh, destructive devices and suppressors. I forgot suppressors. So suppressors are pretty easy. You guys know what suppressors are. They're not as quiet as you would think they would be when you see them in the movies. But the term firearm silencer, this is the ATF's division. The term firearm silencer or firearm muffler means any device for silencing, muffling, or diminishing the report of a portable firearm, including any combination of parts designed or redesigned and intended for the use in assembling or fabricating a firearm silencer or firearm muffler. Any part intended only for use in such assembly or fabrication. Okay, so if it makes the sound of the gun quieter, it's considered a suppressor. And then we get into destructive devices, which is actually one of the more simple definitions by the ATF, but it's devices such as grenades, bombs, explosive missiles, poison gas weapons, etc., and any firearm with a bore over a half-inch, except for shotguns or shotgun shells, which have found to be generally recognized as particularly suitable for sporting purposes. And in parentheses, the ATF says many firearms with bores over half-inch, such as 20-gauge or 12-gauge shotguns, are exempted from the law because they have been determined to have a quote-unquote legitimate sporting use. So there are rifles chambered in rounds that are larger than a half-inch. If you've ever heard of 50 caliber, 50 caliber is the caliber refers to the diameter of the bullet it shoots. 50 is .50, meaning half an inch. There are African big game hunting rounds that are 0.7 inches and maybe even 0.8. The largest shoulder-fired round ever developed is 0.95 inches, called the .95 JDJ. You may have seen the video on YouTube, but it's freaking huge. But because those guns are quote-unquote have a legitimate sporting use, then they're exempted from this destructive device. Okay? So that is the National Firearms Act of 1934. That is the first one. It didn't have that much of an effect. It just is a huge pain in the ass to people who want to have a rifle with a barrel of shorter than 16 inches, a shotgun barrel of less than 18 inches, or a suppressor. Which, by the way, in a lot of European countries and in New Zealand, the more quote-unquote civilized world, in a lot of those places they're mandatory because the loud noise from the guns pisses people off. So they say you have to buy a suppressor if you're going to go shooting. You can walk into a gun store and just buy a suppressor. There's no special paperwork. So in America, it's a pain to buy it. So, okay, so the next one. Let's get into the next one. This one is called the Gun Control Act of 1968. This was signed in by Lyndon Johnson. This is a gun control act that the NRA did back. At the time, the exec VP said this is a law that, and I quote, "The measure as a whole appears to be one that sportsmen of America can live with," end quote. So there was a time when the NRA didn't just fight every single gun law. I'm not sure if that's because the culture of the NRA was different or whatnot, but this gun law didn't really... I kind of agree with some of it, I guess. A lot of it doesn't make any sense. But anyways, what this law did a couple things. It made mail order systems illegal. It required gun dealers to get a license. It made interstate handgun purchases illegal. It made that long guns and long gun ammo, so long guns are rifles and shotguns, that those guns and ammo cannot be purchased or can be purchased by someone over the age of 18. And it made that handgun and handgun ammo must be purchased by someone over the age of 21. It required that serial numbers be put on all guns manufactured by someone possessing an FFL. It made removal of the serial number a felony. and it made imported guns with no quote unquote sporting purpose illegal to be owned by civilians. And it also set up who could and could not own a firearm. Okay, so this act was put into place because of JFK's and MLK's assassinations. JFK was assassinated with an Italian Carcano rifle, which was the general issue battle rifle for Italian troops during World War II. Not a very particularly accurate or desirable firearm, but what the guy ordered it through a catalog. And so basically before this time, if you wanted to sell guns, you didn't have to have a license. You could just sell them, and you could sell them through the mail. So there was an exemption, though. If you're sending your gun in for repairs, you can send them in to the dealer or the shop, and they can mail it right back to you. It does not need to go through an FFL. That changes depending on what state you're in nowadays, but back then that was okay. Like I said before, it required gun dealers to get a license. At this time, though, you still didn't need a background check to buy a gun. This wouldn't happen actually until 1998, so not for another 30 years. It made interstate handgun purchases illegal, which is still going on today. However, I just saw that in I think it was the House, maybe it was the Senate, I can't remember, but they are looking to repeal that law so that a citizen of any state can go to another state and purchase a handgun. Right now, let's say, okay, so if you're a citizen of Nevada, if you reside in Nevada, and you go to Utah to buy a gun, you can buy a long gun, aka a rifle or a shotgun. However, you cannot purchase a pistol. The law they're hoping to get to go through would be one that would say you can purchase a gun in any state that you want, unless that state makes a law that says only people from this state can purchase pistols. So yeah, and that's all. Requiring gun dealers to get a license, that makes sense. I'm not sure if it's really done anything, but the part about you can, if you're you have to be 18 to purchase a rifle or shotgun, and you have to be 21 to purchase a handgun. I don't understand how that, why we need that age difference. I don't even know why we need it for alcohol. I don't get it, but I think if you're 18 and you want to get drunk and, run your car into a pole, then hopefully you didn't get anyone pregnant and you won't live anymore and, your seed won't live on. But I'm not sure. I was once 18 and 21, and I'm not sure I had much more sense between the years. I probably didn't. But regardless, that is the law. But the hard part, especially with the handgun ammo, you have to be 21 or older to purchase it. Handgun calibers can often be shot in rifles. They're called, pistol caliber carbines or pistol caliber rifles. So you can buy a rifle chambered in 9mm or 45 ACP or even 380 ACP, and if you're 18, you're allowed. You can legally own that gun, but you can't purchase ammunition for it. You can purchase ammunition online, and some states require that you have an ID that you submit to the company through email before they can send it to your door. Other states right now are trying to enact laws that will make it so that in order to purchase ammunition online, it must go through an FFL, which is a federal firearms license. We just call gun dealers and people that hold those FFLs. So if I ever say FFL, what I'm referring to is a federal firearms license, and that is someone who has gone through the paperwork by the ATF to be able to legally sell and deal firearms. You don't need one to sell ammunition, as far as I know. I'll need to look into that, but I don't think you do. But anyways, some states are trying to do that. Other states don't really care. That wacko in Colorado, what's his name? It's not Adam Lanza. That was Connecticut wacko. But that guy that shot up the Aurora Theater in Colorado, he bought his ammo through a website called Lucky Gunner, and the parents that were of several of the victims have sued Lucky Gunner and said that, you're responsible for this. Lucky Gunner defended themselves and won. Those people have to pay their court costs and legal fees, and they can't, and now they're pissed off. So you'll see that in the news, but that's what's going on there. I personally don't think that Lucky Gunner should be responsible for his actions. I mean, that was a horrible, horrible, horrible thing, but I don't understand why Lucky Gunner should be responsible. Anyways, this is the first time serial numbers were required to be put on all guns. Before that, it wasn't necessary. Companies may have done it before for, inventory purposes. I mean, I have a M1 Garand from 1955, I believe, with a serial number on it. The Army may have required serial numbers for inventory purposes, and or, if they discovered that a certain serial number set just sucked, they could go back. But up until that point, it was not required, though some manufacturers did do serial numbers. And this was the really stupid one. It made imported guns with no quote-unquote sporting purpose illegal to be owned by civilians. The ATF defines sporting purpose as hunting and competition shooting, not plinking and just having fun or home defense or self-defense or whatever, okay? So, you might be asking yourself, well, how does the ATF decide if a gun has a sporting purpose or not? Well, there's something called the ATF Form 4590. I'll probably put this up on the Facebook page, but hold on, guys, I'm gassy. Oh. My beard itches too. Can you hear that? I wonder why it itches. So anyways, there's this ATF Form 4590, and it sets up a point system that a firearm must have in order to be imported. Points are awarded for things like caliber used, safety features, length, weight, etc. There are rules that are different for pistols and revolvers, and I haven't seen the form for rifles and shotguns. I'm not sure why it'd be a different form, but the only form I could find was the 4590. Okay, so there are a couple. You guys have probably heard of Glocks. There are a couple Glock pistols that aren't imported to the U.S. because they don't meet these qualifications, and they're not manufactured in the U.S. But it's another stupid law. I mean, it's stupid. But the last part that this law came about was it's set up who could. Excuse me, I'm speaking too fast. Who could and could not own a firearm. The National Instant Criminal Background Check System wouldn't be mandated until 1993, and it wouldn't be up and running until 1998. Also, the right to own a firearm can be taken away, but can also be reinstated, depending on the state, usually is how it works. That's pretty complicated. We're not going to get into that today, into the reinstation of rights after you've committed a felony. But when you fill out a background check form, Form 4473, at a gun dealer or at a gun show, on it there will be, I think it's about 13 questions. They're yes or no questions, and these decide if you can own a firearm. You have to answer truthfully. Now, we'll just get into that tomorrow. But this is when that started. Obviously, back then there was no way to check if you were lying or not. You just answered truthfully, you just answered, and if you answered truthfully and were legal to own a gun, then you got one. And if you lied so that you made it look like that you weren't unable to own a gun, but you lied so that you could own a gun, then you got your gun. So it didn't make that much sense. There may have been counties, cities, states that had local background check systems, but this is before the internet. I mean, they would. I'm not exactly sure how it works, and honestly I can't find that much information on it. I could probably dig a little bit deeper, but regardless, the instant criminal background check system wouldn't happen until 1998. Okay, so this is the next piece of federal legislation signed in, this was 1986 Firearm Owners Protection Act. This was signed in by Reagan. If you're a big firearms enthusiast, this law totally sucks. But what this law did is it gave the ATF wide latitude on the enforcement of regulations pertaining to FFL holders, pertaining to people who sold guns. So, a 1982 report by a Senate subcommittee said that, and I quote, "The conclusion is thus, inescapable that the history, concept, and wording of the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States, as well as its interpretation by every major commentator and court in the first half-century after its ratification, indicates that what is protected is an individual right of a private citizen to own and carry firearms in a peaceful manner." Okay. The same report also cited that 75% of ATF prosecutions, and I quote, were aimed at ordinary citizens who had neither criminal intent nor knowledge, but were enticed by agents into unknowing technical violation. Basically showing that the ATF are dicks, and they still kind of are. They did stick up to American gun owners when the UN had the balls to demand, or at least ask, was more of a demand, that the United States join in this retarded World Gun Registry program, because I'm sure all the Somali warlords, and I'm sure that Al-Qaeda, Taliban, and the MFing ISIS buttholes will do that. God, I hate the UN. We'll have to do a whole show on how much I hate the UN. But, I mean, the ATF are dicks, especially when it comes to NFA items, the National Firearms Act. These are, short-barreled shotgun, short-barreled rifles. Because the difference between a felony and a perfectly legal weapon can be a half-inch or a buttstock. Now, let me explain that. So, you can have an AR-15 with let's just do a 10-inch barrel. As long as it doesn't have a buttstock on it, it's not considered a rifle. It's considered a pistol. The second you put a buttstock on an AR-15 with a barrel of less than 16 inches, you have a short-barreled rifle, and that's a felony. Okay? But if you have it in the pistol configuration, it's not a difference. So, a lot of guys could probably manufacture a short-barreled rifle without even knowing it. And that's what sucks about the ATF, is that you could have zero criminal intent. I mean, they're prosecuting, like it said here, a lot of people who had no intent and weren't bad people through the lack of understanding of the law, which isn't an excuse, but it's a stupid law. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to own a rifle or shotgun with a barrel of less than 16 inches. It's stupid. But let's we're hopefully, I don't want to get this too much longer, so let's just move forward. Okay, so this Firearm Owners Protection Act, signed in by Reagan, made it illegal to have a gun owners database. Basically, no national gun registry. So some form of databases do exist, but that's a complicated thing. So, for example, if you purchase more than one handgun in a 5-day period, then that gun dealer has to report that to the ATF. Because, I don't know, you're going to dual wield some MAC-10s and, mow down some old people. I don't know. But that for example, that does happen. But there is no such thing as a gun registry in the United States right now. As in, there's not a database where you can input my name, and when you input my name, a list of the firearms that I have purchased come up. Or you can't put in a serial number of one of the guns that I own and my name comes up, or previous owners, or whatever. That's not how it works, okay? So, if you ever hear on the news that there's an unregistered gun, blah, 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 that's all guns are unregistered. There's no such thing as a registered gun, okay? Unless you live in a commie state like California or Connecticut, where they require certain firearms to be registered, because I don't know. So, it made something called the Safe Passage Provision, which is actually a good law. It says basically you can't be charged with breaking a firearm law in a state that has stricter gun laws than the state you reside in if you're just passing through. holding that the firearms and ammunition are not readily available. Okay, so what does this mean? Let's say, I'm trying to think of some. All the strict gun law states are on the coasts. Okay. Let's say Nevada has a law that says you can't have a gun barrel of over, you can't have a pistol with a barrel of over 4 inches. Okay. And let's pretend for a second that California isn't run by commies and isn't a shithole state, and you're driving from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City. You go through Nevada at this point, and you stop, and in Los Angeles, and let's just say that you have a revolver with a 6-inch barrel that you're taking with you from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City to go to a shooting competition, to, murder your ex-wife, whatever. So, you stop in Vegas to go wee-wee and play the slots, and during this time, an officer, you're speeding, you get pulled over, the officer asks you if you have any firearms, you say yes, and he says, okay, where? And you say in the trunk, and it's a revolver, and it has a 6-inch barrel. In the state of Nevada, that would be illegal. Because you're passing through, and you can provide evidence as such with, well, actually, shit. Even if you can't provide evidence. Okay, this law doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But anyways, I guess in a court, you could be able to provide evidence. But it's not a very good example, is it? I really effed up that one. But regardless, it's a good law. It basically says that you don't have to obey arbitrary laws of another state if you're just passing through. Okay, so next one. So it clarified who can and cannot legally possess a firearm. So the other law, the 1968 Gun Control Act, set up who could and could not own a firearm. This law clarifies it, and this is because the Senate and House bills in the 1968 Gun Control Act had different lists, and this led to a lot of confusion. So this law just kind of set it in stone, and it clarified it, okay? This law made it legal to ship ammunition through the United States Postal Service. That was made illegal in 1968 law, but this law made it legal, which is a good idea. It's very smart. And it also limited ATF inspections to once per year. Unless multiple record-keeping violations are occurring, then follow-up visits can happen. The reason they limited it to once a year is because the NRA defended that because the ATF can kind of be dicks, they would harass gun dealers and manufacturers by constant visits, thereby making the employees pay attention to the ATF agents instead of the customers. How true is that? I mean, how much would it have happened? Tough to say. They are government workers, so it's not like they have anything else to do. Right, Eric? And but it was a good argument, and that's how the NRA got that in. There have been a number of manufacturers in the news lately. One of them was, what's it called? Stag Arms? Yeah, Stag Arms, manufacturer of ARs. AR parts. The owner recently lost his FFL and his ability to do that because of bad record keeping. They couldn't account for 300 rifles and some machine guns, which isn't good. I mean, that law is kind of hard to debate on how good it is or not, but if you're going to play the game, you should probably play by the rules for now, Okay, so if you stuck in this long, then you'll be able to hit up this last part, but there's only one more part, okay? Well, actually two. We'll cover, so in 1989, President Bush signed in a law that banned a lot of foreign semi-automatic fire rifles from import because, for whatever reason, whoever wrote the bill deemed they had no sporting purpose, okay? That's why we don't have a lot of cool guns anymore, is because of that stupid law. But this one is going to be very important as well. No, two more. Son of a bitch. How many more do we have? Okay. So in 1993, there was a bill signed called the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act, signed in by Mr. William Clinton. This is often called the Brady Bill, named after James Brady, who was a Secret Service guy during for Reagan, and he was shot during Reagan's attempted assassination. After the shooting, he became permanently disabled. In the aftermath of the shooting, he had slurred speech, had to use a wheelchair, was unable to control his emotions, but eventually he regained the ability to walk and talk again, and become pretty normal. So he became a major figure of gun control, was a chairman of the Brady campaign to prevent gun violence, which is a very strong lobby for gun control, specifically handgun and quote-unquote assault weapon laws. But it was only called the Brady Campaign or Brady Center starting in 2001. So this law mandated federal background checks and a mandatory 5-day waiting period before the National Instant Criminal Background Check System could be set up in 1998. Okay? So from when this law was signed until the national, I'm going to call it the NICS. The NICS was set up, was 5 years. Okay? So for 5 years, if you were going to buy a gun, you had to wait 5 days. However, this did not apply to curios and relics firearms, which are basically old guns. And the ATF definition is manufactured 50 years before the current date, which most gun websites or dealers don't really follow. So, for example, I have an M1 Garand. It was manufactured in 1955, so that was 61 years ago. If you go to a gun store and they have an M1 and you want to buy it and you say, hey, I don't have to have a background check because it's a curio and relic, they'll probably say, yeah, well, tough shit, you're doing one. So the better definition, I guess, would be if it shoots ammunition that is not readily available, it doesn't need to go through a background check. Okay, so 30-40 Spanish, 50-70 government, old rounds from like the 1800s. So for example, a Springfield 1903 bolt-action rifle that was issued during World War I was made well over 50 years ago, but because it is chambered in .30-06, which is a common round still in use today, most will not consider it a CR exclusion. The same goes for like Mosin Nagants, and Lee Enfields, Carcanos, a lot of still commonly used rifles that were made a long time ago, okay? So this background check system does not apply to personal transfers unless your state so designates. And the NRA opposed it when it was first proposed in 1987. But the NRA did, however, make a compromise and say that as soon as the NICS is in place, no more 5-day waiting period. So in 1997, the NRA sued in a case called Pritz v. United States. And I quote, the NRA argued that the Brady Act was unconstitutional because its provisions requiring local law enforcement officers to conduct background checks was a violation of the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. Okay, so here's the text of the 10th Amendment is, and I quote, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Okay. So the Supreme Court, this case went to the Supreme Court and it decided with the NRA. However, the overall Brady statute was upheld and state and local law enforcement officials remained free to conduct background checks if they so chose. The vast majority continued to do so. In 1998, background checks for firearm purchases became mostly a federally run activity when NICS came online, although many states continue to mandate state-run background checks before a gun dealer may transfer a firearm to a buyer. Okay. Background checks for firearms purchases operate in only one direction because of the Firearm Owners Protection Act. That is, although a firearms dealer may obtain electronic information that an individual is excluded from firearms purchases, the FBI and the ATF do not receive electronic information in return to indicate what firearms are being purchased. Okay, so no gun registry, basically. So, how good is the Brady bill? How good is the National Instant Criminal Background Check System? Since 1998, 0.5% of background checks have been denied by the system, mostly because of convicted felons. Prosecution and conviction of violators of the Brady Act are extremely rare. Less than 0.1%. Probably less than that. A 2000 study showed that the Brady Act helped reduce suicide rates in people 55 and older, but had no effect on homicide or other groups' suicide rates. Okay, so the Brady bill, and at least this study has shown that it hasn't prevented homicide or suicide except in people 55 or older. Which my idea is, if you're 55 or older, you're probably depressed, you don't know how to break the law, you try and go buy a gun, you can't because you're a felon, and so you don't kill yourself because, I don't know. If I was going to kill myself, I would do the exhaust thing. Just, put a hose in your exhaust, sit in your car, put on some tunes, fall asleep, and then you're dead. Come on, guys. Okay, let's get this is going a little bit long. Let's get this last one in real quick. Okay, so this is the last bill. Obama's recent executive actions for gun control are stupid. They won't do anything. He's an idiot. So is everyone who supports him. But this is the 1994 assault weapons ban. This was signed in by Mr. William Clinton also. Okay. This was officially called the Public Safety and Recreational Firearms Use Protection Act. This was written by Dianne Feinstein. She's a senator from California. She admitted the bill that was passed was weaker than the original intended bill, which makes sense because she wants full-on confiscation, even though she has armed security. So she can be protected by guns, but we can't because we're not as good as she is. So this law is a subset of the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. To be specific, it is the Title IX, Subtitle A of the Act. It took effect on September 13th, 1994, ended on September 13th, 2004, 10 years later. Several times politicians tried to renew it, but were unsuccessful. The NRA opposed it with good measure. It's a stupid law, and it didn't do anything. November 1993, NRA spokesman said that assault weapons were used in only 1% of all crimes, and those were backed by a DOJ brief in 1999. DOJ's Department of Justice. Okay, so this is what the law says. Basically, it barred the manufacture of 19 specific, by name, semi-automatic firearms they called, quote-unquote, assault weapons. This was due only to their cosmetic features. The cosmetic features that would have made a rifle illegal were folding or telescoping stocks, pistol grips. A pistol grip is a grip that is more vertical than horizontal. When you get into shotguns, especially traditional shotguns, there's straight grip and there's pistol grip. But for this meaning, a pistol grip is one that is more vertical than horizontal, is the best definition I can give. Bayonet mounts. Now you may be thinking, well, what does someone need a bayonet mount for? However, a common feature for an AR-15 gas block / front sight tower includes a bayonet. A bayonet mount, okay? It also said you couldn't have attachable grenade launchers, which aren't common at all. However, they are totally badass. They can be purchased now without any special paperwork for like $200, $240. And you can shoot cool chalk rounds and like smoke grenades out of them. They're pretty freaking awesome. Two more of the rifle accessories that I had on a rifle were flash suppressors and muzzle brakes, which are little things that you screw on at the end of a muzzle that reduce recoil or the flash of the gun, and threaded barrels that could accept a muzzle device. Okay, so the features that were banned for a pistol were a magazine that extends beyond the end of the grip, so we would call them nowadays extended magazines. Okay, a threaded barrel, a forward hand grip, so essentially you would be both hands on a pistol, one holding the grip, and then another one has a grip up front. It's stupid, but actually it's kind of cool. It depends on the gun. But a barrel shroud. A barrel shroud is just a piece of metal that goes around the barrel. That's it. That's all it is. It doesn't do anything. That's all it does. Pistols that weighed 50 ounces or more when unloaded, and a semi-auto version of an automatic pistol. Okay, there are fully automatic pistols, the Glock 18C, and there are fully automatic versions of the Glock 43 and the Glock 19. Also a Beretta. I forget what the Beretta is called. I think it's the Beretta R93. But the gun that RoboCop uses in the original RoboCop, that was a fully automatic pistol. They're called machine pistols. Okay. Pistols that weighed 50 ounces or more, those would generally be pistols chambered in rifle calibers, like I kind of talked about a little bit before. Now, for shotguns, the features that were illegal were folding or telescoping stocks, a pistol grip, and in this case, the pistol grip is kind of like an AR-15 grip, a fixed magazine that can hold more than 5 rounds, and the ability to accept a detachable magazine, okay? As well as, now this is the big one, no magazine, belt, drum, clips, or ammunition feeding device could be made that held over 10 rounds. So if it was a magazine or a clip that held over 10 rounds, it was illegal. If it was an ammunition feeding device and it held more than 10 rounds, it could not be manufactured during this 1994 to 2004 time period, okay? At this time, they decided that magazines that held over 10 rounds were called high capacity. High capacity is relative to what standard capacity is, and standard capacity differs from each weapon. So, for example, AR-15s, a standard capacity is 30-round magazines. Anything above 30 rounds would be considered high capacity. I have a SIG P320 semi-automatic pistol that ships with a 14-round magazine, 14 or 15 rounds. Anything more than that would be high capacity or extended capacity, okay? Some of the 19 firearms that were named in the Act that could not be made by name were the Tech 9 and variants, the Tech 9, the Tech DC-9, and the Tech 22. You've probably seen a Tech 9. If you've ever seen the show Archer, Lana Kane carries Tech 9s. That's what you see her shoot, or Tech 9s. They were also used in the Columbine shootings and other high-profile shootings. They're kind of mean-looking guns. From videos I've seen, they shoot anywhere from meh to pretty good, probably depending on the model you have. But that was banned because it looked scary. That's it. Okay? Another example are the Galil and the Uzi. You've definitely heard of, the Uzi. Those are Israeli-made firearms, and they're freaking awesome. I'd punch a little baby in the face for a Galil. Those guns are freaking sweet. And this last one is awesome. It's called the Cobra Street Sweeper. Cobra was a crappy gun company that made crappy guns. They made this horrible shotgun called the Street Sweeper. The Street Sweeper got banned because it was called a street sweeper, essentially naming it, a gun that you're going to go and sweep the street with it. It was a 12-gauge shotgun with a revolving cylinder that you had to eject each shot. It was so stupid. If you want to see a stupid gun, I'll probably put it on Facebook page, but the Street Sweeper is so stupid. But because the only things that barred the guns from being manufactured were cosmetic features, it was easy for manufacturers to work around the law and keep producing firearms. In fact, in order for a gun to be banned, it only had to have more than 2 of the features. 2 or less of those cosmetic features I listed before, and the gun was good to go. Later on, studies showed that the law had virtually zero effect on crime, mostly because the guns banned were almost never used in crime, and because criminals don't care about the law. Shocking. The ban only banned cosmetic features that neither made the firearms more or less quote-unquote deadly. It just changed the way they look. Today, there are other states that have their own laws that are similar to this. For example, New York and California. For example, California rifles must have a fixed magazine and be equipped with a quote-unquote bullet button. I say quote-unquote a lot, don't I? Is it annoying? Comment in Facebook or YouTube. So anyways, this bullet button, which is a button inside the magazine release on AR-15s that requires a tool to release the magazine, generally the tip of a bullet, hence the bullet button. New York AR-15s specifically are ugly, horrible guns that shoot like crap. I don't even know why you'd have one. But guess what states have high crime rates? Gee, golly gosh, I wonder. Now, that's not solely because of their horrible gun laws. It's also because of poverty levels. The major cities there, and in almost all major cities, crime always rises. We're going to get into that tomorrow. But today, those are the gun laws that you need to know about or you don't need to know about. But if you've listened to this, you know more about gun law in the United States than 99% of people. So I hope you enjoyed that. We went a little long today. Hopefully you will listen to this sometime. Maybe. Who gives a shit? But tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about gun myths. And a little bit as to why gun control does and doesn't work and compare it to other nations. So, thank you for listening. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.